Hi, I'm Parneet Jaggi, and this is going to be the second lecture on Mrs. Dalloway, a novel by Virginia Woolf. And as we covered a brief introduction to the characters of the novel, Mrs. Dalloway, we will again look into how Mrs. Dalloway came into print and into light, and why it is one of the most important novels of English literature till date. This novel was published in 1925, and it talks about a day in the life of a character, a fictional character, Clarissa Dalloway, who is actually a high society woman in post First World War England. And it is still widely read and widely known novel of Woolf. So when we look into the story, we have the introduction of this lady, Mrs. Dalloway. Clarissa Dalloway. She is a married lady with a daughter and a husband in her family. So we see that Mrs. Dalloway covers one day from morning to night in one woman's life, and this one woman is Clarissa. She's an upper class housewife, walks through her London neighborhood to prepare for the party that she's going to host that evening. So when she returns from the flower shopping, an old suitor and friend, Peter Walsh, drops by her house unexpectedly. So now we have a surprise in the very beginning of the novel. Now this Peter Walsh character is actually the lover of her youth, and they were quite close friends. But for some reasons, these two characters, the two lovers, have always judged each other harshly. And now their meeting in the present kind of brings back those memories and intertwines the thoughts of the past. Years earlier, what had happened was that Clarissa had refused Peter's marriage proposal, and Peter had never quite got over it. So Peter asks Clarissa now that if she is happy with her husband Richard, but before she can answer, her daughter Elizabeth enters the room. So Peter leaves and goes to Regent's Park, and he thinks about Clarissa's refusal, which still obsesses him even now. Now the point of view now shifts to Septimus. Now Septimus, as we mentioned in the list of characters, is actually a veteran of World War I who was injured in a shell bombing, in a trench warfare, and now suffers from that shell shock. So Septimus and his Italian wife Lucrezia, they pass their time in Regent's Park. They're waiting for Septimus's appointment with a celebrated psychiatrist by the name of Sir William Bradshaw. Now, when we look at his background, Septimus was actually a budding young poet and a lover of Shakespeare when the war broke out. He enlisted himself immediately for romantic, patriotic reasons. He became numb to the horrors of war and its aftermath. Even when his friend Ivan's died, he felt little sadness. Now Septimus sees nothing worth in the England he fought for. And now he has kind of lost the desire to preserve either his society or himself. So he is now having a suicidal temperament, and he believes his lack of feeling is a crime. He doesn't feel anything. So clearly we see that his experiences in the war have permanently scarred him, bruised him, injured him, and he is suffering from some serious mental problems. However, Sir William Bradshaw, the psychiatrist, does not listen to what Septimus says, and he himself diagnoses that he suffers from a lack of proportion. So Sir William plans to separate Septimus from his wife Lucrezia and send him to a mental institution in the countryside. Now, on the other side, we see that Clarissa's husband, Richard Dalloway, eats lunch with Hugh Whitbread and Lady Bruton, members of high society of London. The men helped Lady Bruton write a letter to the Times, London's largest newspaper. And after lunch, Richard returns home to Clarissa with a bunch of roses, and he intends to tell her that he loves her, but he finds that he cannot. because it has been so long that he last said it. So now Clarissa considers that there is a void, there is a space, there is a gap which exists between people, even between them, husband and wife. So even though she values the privacy that she's been able to maintain in a marriage, considering it quite important for the success of a relationship, quite vital, but at the same time, she finds slightly disturbing the fact that Richard doesn't know everything about her. She's not known to her husband also. So Clarissa sees off Elizabeth and her history teacher, Miss Kilman, who are going for shopping. The two older women despise one another passionately, each believing the other to be an oppressive force over Elizabeth. So then we see, meanwhile, Septimus and Lucrezia are in the apartment, enjoying a moment of happiness together before the men come to take Septimus to the asylum. Now, asylum is a mental hospital where he will be treated for his mental illness. One of Septimus's doctors, Dr. Holmes, who is actually a general practitioner of Septimus, arrives there. And Septimus fears the doctor will destroy his soul. So, in order to avoid this fate, he jumps from the window and he dies. Now, Septimus is a very close friend to the family of Clarissa and Peter also. Peter hears the ambulance go by to pick up Septimus's body and marvels ironically at the level of London civilization. Now, because Peter has been away from London, and so he finds this very strange, he goes to Clarissa's party where most of the novel's major characters are assembled. Clarissa works hard to make her party a success but feels dissatisfied by her own role and acutely conscious of Peter's critical eye. Now, all these are friends of the youth, people who are collected over there, and Peter is one person who has been the lover of Clarissa. So, definitely, there is some conscious air, something very uncomfortable, some discomforting eye which Clarissa feels. And all these party goers who have collected in the party of Clarissa, especially when we look at Peter and Sally Seton, who have been friends to Clarissa in youth, have to some degree failed to accomplish the dreams of their youth. Though we see the social order is changing in London and in Europe, still Elizabeth and the members of her generation will probably repeat the errors of Clarissa's generation. Now here we see that Sir William Bradshaw arrives late in the party, and his wife explains to everybody that one of his patients, the young veteran Septimus, has committed suicide. Now when Clarissa comes to know of Septimus's suicide, she retreats to the privacy of a small room to consider Septimus's death. She understands that he was overwhelmed by life and that men like Sir William make life intolerable. She identifies with Septimus, admiring him for having taken the plunge and for not compromising his soul. Now see, Clarissa is feeling, because right now she has a comfortable position in the society as a hostess, she's hosting a party. But somewhere she also feels responsible for his death, because she had a close resemblance with him. Now we see the party is almost at the close and the guests begin to leave. And Clarissa enters the room and her presence fills people like Peter, who have been old friends, with great excitement. So this is how in just one day there have been events like the party and the suicide of Septimus and contemplation of these characters to look into their youth and regret over the decisions they have taken. But on the whole, we see that there are not too many events taking place in the novel. It is just the stream of consciousness that is playing an important, a vital role in the novel. So, this was my analysis, a brief overview of the plot of the novel Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. We will look into the themes and the symbolism and the analytical perspective of the novel in the next lecture. Thank you for now.